Hello, good parishioners of Presentation Parish. This is Father Mark, and it's day 86 of the Bible in a Year. We're looking at Joshua chapters 15 through 18, and it's more of the allotments, the dividing up of the territories for each of the tribes. They were each supposed to get certain areas, except the Levites. They didn't get, they're the priestly tribe, and they got to just get, around the temple. They would receive offerings there. They got to hang around the temple and get gifts, and then they could walk around the country and mooch off of everyone. That was kind of how it was for Levites. But the other tribes each got an area. It begins in chapter 15 with the territory of Judah. Of course, Judah was the tribe that had not been disqualified. One of the older brothers who got a bigger blessing from his father Jacob, and so they get a big section which includes Jerusalem as well. And then it speaks in chapter 16 of two other big segments or sections of northern part of Israel, and that was the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh. And it's interesting, these huge swaths of land were given to those two who were actually not even sons of Jacob. They were not among the 12 sons, but they were two grandsons. They were two grandsons, sons of Joseph, the most beloved son of Jacob. Remember the story in the book of Genesis. In Genesis chapter 48, at the end of the book, it speaks of how as Jacob was dying, he blessed all of his sons, and he gave them each a blessing. And Joseph's two sons, his grandsons, he laid hands on them as well and gave them a blessing, but he put his right hand on Ephraim's head, who was the younger grandson, and his left hand on Manasseh's head. And so the dad, Joseph, was not happy and said, "Hey, no, the firstborn is Manasseh." But no, Jacob did a switcheroo and put his right hand on Ephraim's head and gave the youngest of the grandsons, a bigger blessing, and said the younger brother will be greater. That's a constant theme in the Bible, that the younger gets an inheritance and the oldest kind of gets disqualified or has to suffer more. And of course, it's a symbol of Jesus Christ, who's the older brother of all of us, but we get. And he suffers, but we get the inheritance, and that's how God is. He likes to raise up the lowly and cast down the mighty throughout the Bible. Here in this part of the book of Joshua, you have a couple of mentions of the first time in the Bible that the name of the town Jerusalem is mentioned. It's mentioned in chapter 15, verse 63. That the Jebusites, this really tough, warlike tribe apparently, or peoples, kind of pagan peoples, they couldn't be driven out. They had this little citadel, this highly fortified city, and it wasn't captured until later in the first book of Judges. In the book of Judges, chapter 1, we're going to hear a little bit about that it was conquered by the Israelites for a short time, and then it was lost again, because then later King David was the one who finally conquered it, took it from the Jebusites, and made it his capital, the capital of Israel. So they finally conquered this stubborn little town in the middle of Canaan, in the middle of the Promised Land. This little town, which ended up being, their capital. In this section also in chapter 17, verses 12 and 13, you get an example of something that some of the Canaanites were not driven out, that they were not able to conquer some of the areas, and they didn't destroy them, and they just made them into slaves or laborers. And you see it again in other parts of this section, but later that would be a real problem for the Israelites, because the Israelites, since they didn't, drive out or destroy all of the Canaanites were left in the land, and the Canaanites were were pagans and idol worshippers, and so the influence of them, and it's a constant problem, and that's perhaps why God had commanded that they drive out or destroy all of the people who insisted on trying to stay in the land that really belonged to God and to God's people as a holy land. I think it's really important to see the people of Israel coming into this land and conquering it by war and by force. It seems harsh and all, but throughout the book of Joshua and the Pentateuch as well, you're finding that it's so necessary. It's so necessary to be harsh against idolatry. And so it's important to know that it's not because of some sort of racism or some sort of genocide, or they're just hating other people from other nationalities, because even when the Israelites themselves were committing idolatry, the consequences were very strict and harsh. And remember in the book of Exodus, chapter 32, it speaks about the golden calf and how the Levites were, the tribe of Levi was the ones who stood up for Moses, and they were they slayed those who were adoring and worshiping the golden calf, and doing this sort of orgy of erotic dancing and such, and idolatry. And in chapter 32 there of Exodus, Moses says, "You have ordained yourselves." So the Levites became the priestly tribe because of the fact that they were firm against idolatry. They were going to, really be strong against worshiping, basically, idols, which were often demons. In fact, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 17, there's another example of how even after the Israelites left Egypt and they were wandering through the desert, they were sometimes tempted, and they would worship actually this goat god, or a satyrs. So basically, it's really a symbol of the demons. So the danger for the Israelites too was to start practicing basically demon worship, which is of course very dangerous, and so that's why even the Israelites who would dabble in that kind of thing would have to be, they would be given the capital punishment, because it was something completely against what they were supposed to be as a holy priestly people who were supposed to bring the good news of one God to the world and create a perfect society in the promised land where Yahweh and God could be worshipped and light could go out to the whole world. This idolatry was completely out of place.